Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live again from Film Fanatic headquarters. It is 10:36 Tuesday, January 20th. Had a long vacation break again, which was great, but kind of weird because after having a bunch of time off from work and shit from Christmas, we had like a week and a half, and then went back to school for like maybe like a week or two. It feels maybe a little bit more, but not very long. One full week and maybe a half a week. It's kind of a blur sometimes. And then this past week, I had Friday off, and then yesterday, Friday we had a teacher conference day, and so that is a day off for me. And then Sunday, or I should say, yesterday, Monday was Martin Luther King Day, so that was another day off. So, but it was nice and relaxed. We had a lot of nice snow this weekend. I went to see the Secret Agent a second time. What a masterpiece! I've been recommending that movie so much to people. I got that. I got that movie recommended to me from my great buddy Sean Russell, who got to see it early, like an advanced screening. So I've seen it twice in the theater, and just amazing. I remember thinking I saw it kind of late when I was gonna make my video for my top picks of 2025, and I saw it kind of after the fact, and I was like, damn, I should have like waited, because that is easily one of the best movies. You could say it's the best movie. Also, I mean, it's that good. So I've been recommending that movie as much as I can, and to, if you get a chance to see it in the theater, I just uploaded a new video of seeing it the second time. I do that a lot. I have been doing that more, and it's been really awesome. I Up until I guess a couple of years ago, it had been a long time since I went to the movies twice. When I'm home, again, if I own a movie, I'll watch it, and I really dig the movie. I'll watch it till the cows come home. Going to the theater, obviously, it's a little bit different because it costs a lot more, and you got to kind of plan your day around it. But that's the true way to experience the art form of cinema. I think it is. And so last year I saw Nosferatu, Robert Eggers' last film, which is my favorite version of Dracula. I saw that twice in the theater, and then I saw One Battle After Another. I saw that twice this year, or I should say, well, no, I saw it when it came out, which was technically last year, because we're just into 2026 here. Saw it when it came out in the fall, right around my birthday, and then I saw it just a couple weeks ago in 2026. So I saw it twice, and then the same thing with Secret Agent. I saw it twice as well. So that says a lot. That says a lot for the quality of films that are out right now and that have been coming out, and very much looking forward to. There seems like there's a pretty cool roster of films coming out this year in 2026. I'm really excited. I was going to go see Primate on Sunday, but then we got another big snowstorm, so we ended up canceling. We didn't end up going, which was probably the best call because the roads were pretty shitty. The roads were pretty shitty on Saturday when I went to the Secret Agent, but we went to the Colonial, which is like, a 7-minute drive. I don't mind driving in the snow. I kind of like it, and so a truck is good in the snow. So, but granted, if I have to drive, over an hour away or whatever, that could be a little bit more, uneasy. So, yeah, today's show is on a movie I've actually been wanting to see for a super, super long time. And it's interesting because I think there's a lot of, I don't know, there's a lot to talk about aside from the movie, just what I normally do on this channel where I just kind of, talk about the movie, discuss it a little bit, and kind of review it. And that is Chris Stuckman's debut film feature, Shelby Oaks. I saw it last night. Yesterday was my mom's birthday, and we went over. I went over there like when like I normally do, for the holidays or just other days too, and we got some really delicious Chinese food and birthday cake, and of course I rented movies. I always do that, and because we always watch, we that's just how we I guess roll as a family. We always watch a shit ton of movies. So we watched. My mom is a huge fan of. She's really into horror films. She got me into horror films when I was a kid, which is just wild when I think about it. But her favorite horror franchise is the Final Destination movies, which I actually really think they're pretty awesome. And there was a new one that came out, I think about a year ago, called, and it was I think it's the sixth movie in the franchise, Final Destination: Blood Ties. And I saw it when it first came out on DVD, and I did a review on that, and it's awesome. I really think it's one of the best in the franchise. I think it's just as good as the first two, which I think are really, really great. Great kills, and actually, it's actually just a very well done horror movie. I think it's one of the best in the franchise. So that's my mom's favorite franchise, and she had not seen it, so I rented that and we rewatched. For me, it was a rewatch, and I have to say, I almost think I enjoyed it even more. It's just super entertaining. Great kills, really great kills. I think they upped the ante a little bit with the kills. The kills are more brutal in this one, and they're pretty inventive, which is a thing that we kind of expect for the franchise. And they did a really good thing, I felt, with featuring Tony Todd because he passed away and he was such a horror icon, and they did a really good job, I think, handling that. So, and he was a star of all those films. He was in so many horror films over the years, and of course, his most important role as an actor in horror was the original Candyman, one of the greatest horror movies ever made. So, very very cool. But anyway, and then in the other movie we watched was Chris Tuckman's Shelby Oaks. These were all DVD copies. I got them at Opera House Video. My folks loved Final Destination. They seemed to like Shelby Oaks. They were a little bit more critical. Um, and for me, it was kind of the same thing. And again, I kind of wanted to talk about, because there's a lot of things around this movie. Chris Tuckman, I think, when I had this wacky idea of doing this channel, like I've had, technically, I've had this channel for about probably like 5 years, no, probably about 3 years, 3 to 4 years. And I remember um, setting up a YouTube channel, and I never really did anything with it. I ended up setting up uh, a channel, and I ended up, focusing more on my Facebook page, my Film Fanatic Facebook page, and then started doing that a lot, like posting and all that shit, and then I started getting into, doing video stuff, and that was kind of the start of where I, kind of pursued this more, and now it's like a thing that I do all the time, and I really really love it. And the thing that was the hardest for me was, it was weird because when I started the Film Fanatic page, I was getting traction pretty well, pretty quickly, and it was going pretty well. And I had always heard from people that starting a YouTube channel is hard because it's or it's extra hard to get traction, to get people to follow you, to like your stuff. And so that was daunting to me, and I honestly just didn't know anything about it. But I remember the first YouTube guy I ever watched who reviewed movies was Chris Tuckman. And I got into him probably about, it was actually before COVID. So it's been probably, which is always mind-boggling to me when I think of the timeline. But a couple of years before COVID or so, I discovered Chris Stuckman, and I really loved his channel. He mostly, is mostly he's still, and he's obviously still doing it. Uh, Mostly he covers horror films and mostly new films, but he does cover you know dramas. I mean, all kinds of genres, but mostly like he definitely um, he caught my attention because he was talking a lot about new movies that were coming out, new horror films, and I remember the one that really stuck with me was The Invisible Man, and then that was the first movie that I saw in the remake that came out a few years ago, which is such an awesome movie. That was the first movie I saw in this channel that I was like, wow, okay, I don't know anything about this movie, I'm gonna go see it, and then I saw it, and then I was blown away. And that had been a thing for a few years where I was like watching his channel, and I still watch it, and really loved it. I thought he is really smart, and even at that time, I was watching a lot of older films, and I still do, probably even more so now. Like the majority of most of the films that I watch are like older films, 60s, 70s, early 80s. I typically do rent a lot of new films to stay up on what's coming out at Opera House Video, of course. And then obviously I have been going to the movies a lot, which has been super awesome. It's probably my favorite activity. If I'm free and I maybe have a few extra bucks, and I have a little group of friends that are also really into movies, so I probably enjoy doing that more than anything else. Even again, I just love the whole experience of going to the theater. Even if I enjoy even if the movie is not very good. I enjoy that interaction. It's exciting, and I don't know. It's just, and I've always felt that way about going to the movies. So obviously, when I go to the movies, which has been a lot more the last few years, I went to the movies a lot last year, and I've been going to the movies quite a bit this year. Um, Obviously, they're for the most part all newer, modern films. And I remembered it was probably, Jesus, had to have been at least 3 years ago. After I got into Chris Stuckman, and he was the first guy I watched who was a YouTube guy talking about movies, and it was kind of like this, I don't know, kind of a revelation. I was like, wait, oh, you can watch, because when I grew up, the only show that I watched, where you could see it, was as far as reviews of films or film criticism, was obviously I was like a child in the '80s, late '70s, and it was Siskel and Ebert. We used to watch that as a kid. I used to watch that all the time as a kid and as a family, and that was the first time I had ever seen two people talk about film, and and it was great. And then and things have obviously changed dramatically, and Chris Stuckman was the first guy that I saw online doing essentially doing that, and I'm like, this is really cool, like this is really awesome. And then that opened me up to checking out a bunch of other YouTube guys and girls out there that I watch pretty much on a regular basis, and I spend more time doing that. When it comes to being on social media, that's really what I do most of the time. I don't really, I try not to spend any time too much on Instagram or Facebook, especially Facebook, because Facebook is a kind of a shithole. So, and Instagram is just kind of dumb sometimes. But I I use those platforms. I mean, it's interesting because whenever there's music events or things happening, that's the only way I find out about it. So I think there is some good things about it, and I do feel when I'm trying to do what I can to promote events, shows that I'm doing, quantum shows or whatever, that's what I use, and it is viable. It does make a difference, and whatever. There's all these negative things, obviously, that I'm not going to go into that are just an endless, deep, dark trench that you could spend all day in. Um, but so after discovering Chris Stuckman, I got into all these other YouTube guys. But I remember it was about at least 3 years ago, probably 4 years ago. Chris Stuckman was talking about, wanting to eventually become a filmmaker, and he, he was working on this project, and he was, writing scripts, and then after a couple of years of hearing about it, he was starting to talk about how he like secured a budget and got this green light to make a film, and he was going to be writing and directing his film. And ever since I'd been watching him, Chris Stuckman, he's kind of always talked about this project or hinted at it, that he always um, wanted to become a filmmaker. And for me, it was right from the beginning of checking out his channel. I was, it was pretty obvious that this guy, and that was the reason I love his channel, and kind of really paid attention to a lot of his reviews. Was he was, you know, you could tell that there was like a deep passion and a real deep love of cinema. So, and it was genuine, and he's a smart guy. He knows what he's talking about, and um, and it was a great resource to learn and to hear about new movies. And after a few years of just kind of checking him out, and then getting into these other YouTube guys and guys and girls I've gotten into, that was like, it really was, for me personally, inspired me to try this thing called, which has become Film Fanatic. So I owe that inspiration to Chris Stuckman mainly, really, and also getting into all these other YouTube guys that I've gotten into. And Chris Stuckman, obviously that opened up the floodgates to realizing, wait, there's this whole other, I don't know, kind of movie critic culture that is all on YouTube that I was totally unaware of. And it was like, wow, this is super cool. And Chris Stuckman is pretty much like, pretty much the biggest YouTube guy out there. I mean, he makes his living doing it. He has millions and millions of followers. Um, and he's huge. And I've discovered other, people as well that do that. But he's pretty much the biggest guy on YouTube talking about film. He's got the most amount of followers and stuff. So fast forward, he was talking about that he got this project off the ground, and it was entitled Shelby Oaks, and it was going to be, essentially he was getting a lot of the finances together, and he was using crowdfunding. So a lot of people were donating money to kind of build up this campaign to make the movie, or to finance the film, and all of these things. And then he would, and then he started the process of making the film, and he was in the midst of it, of actually working on his debut film. So it was like exciting to see, somebody that you really like, who is really passionate about films, who's turned you on to a lot of films, and in a lot of ways when it came to critique of films, and hearing somebody who gives a pretty cool argument for or against the film, seeing somebody who's really passionate kind of having his dreams come true in a lot of ways. So it was pretty exciting to see that happen over a period of a handful of years. And about 5-6 months into the process of him like shooting the film, he was, Chris Stuckman would do his reviews like he normally would do, and he was a pretty prolific in his timing to upload videos. He put up he frequently would post lots of reviews. Like he was always on top of it as far as like new releases. So I used to watch his channel, and along the way, he would give these updates about the progress of Shelby Oaks, and and giving these kind of interesting behind the scenes, um, little tidbits of what it's like to make a film and all these things. And again, for me, it's like I've had experience making films, and I made a really shitty, crappy little movie years ago, that will never see the light of day. And it was super fucking hard, and it was so much fun, and I loved every bit of it. And it was expensive, and it was really hard, and but I loved it. And it was actually, even though I think the movie is not good at all, I it was for me, it was one of the most enjoyable experiences that I've ever had, because it gave me a new kind of new respect for film and cinema, and it gave me a deeper appreciation for the art form. And I've always felt, and especially after that experience, that to me the highest form of artistic expression is the filmmaker. I think the art in the arts, I think filmmaking is the most complicated, and also the most, it's like the highest, like, grand scale way of expression. And I think it's the greatest art form. And I think because there's so many variables to it, it's the most complex, and it's the hardest. I've always said too, like, seeing, I remember years ago seeing a interview with Ridley Scott, and he was like talking about, when he's on set, he feels like he's like a general in a war, and he's commanding this army, because there's so many different things to think about strategically. So I've always thought that is like, so spot on the art of filmmaking, whether it's a incredibly low budget film or an incredibly, a super, huge, with a film with a huge budget. But it was interesting too, because so he was going through this process, making a film, giving updates. It was really interesting, and he was still doing his things. And back when I first saw him, you know review movies, and he would sometimes tear into movies, you know pretty hard, that he felt were not very good. But then other movies he would really rave about. One of the more notorious things I think Chris Stuckman was kind of somewhat popular for was his, like, extreme criticism of, like, the Star Wars prequels, which are really kind of awesome, because he was a he's a big Star Wars fan, but he really kind of tore into those movies, and 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 it's great. It's super fun. It's entertaining. It's really funny, and I think he's spot on. But when he was in the process of making Shelby Oaks, and him becoming a little bit more involved with the actual Hollywood system, or the film system, he kind of came out and more or less said that this whole thing has been a revelation for him, and he realizes now that he's in the trenches becoming a filmmaker, and trying to make this film, on how hard it is to do all of this work. And he kind of set out that he was kind of more or less he was going to kind of stop giving negative reviews of films, to the point of where, like, how he used to be, more critical of films. And he was still going to be a critic, and he was going to still dive into film and new movies, but he was going to take it easy a little bit more, and he was going to try not to be a negative. If he didn't like a film, he wasn't going to highlight that as anymore, and he was going to try to make more or less the reviews a little bit more kinder or gentler. And it was because of his realization of how hard it is, and it's given him this new respect for filmmakers and how it is incredibly hard to make a film. So the whole kind of thing for his channel and the way he kind of you know talked about films obviously changed quite a bit. So around that time, people were starting to criticize Chris Stuckman for coming out and saying that, and that suddenly he was going to be I guess in a nutshell, more or less a nice guy all the time when it comes to films. And that being said, it's like even when I first discovered him, and he, if he didn't like a movie, he would give a good argument for why he wouldn't like a film. He was always like, I think you can be really, really critical of something and not come across as a belligerent asshole. You can be really articulate and still give an intelligent um, layout of why you arrived at that place. Too often, in the world today, everything is clickbait. There's so many things out there that are clickbait, and there is a lot, unfortunately, too many examples of people who are critical of things, but instead of doing it in maybe a more intelligent way, they do it in a real, kind of like from the bully's perspective, or they do it in this very nasty way and almost get it to the point of where they like attack the director or filmmakers or actors, and they do it in this really kind of shitty, disrespectful way, which I think is garbage. And Chris Stuckman never did that. He was never somebody who like attacked somebody, where it was never personal. He's like, no, I love film. I care about film. I know what I'm talking about. This is how I make my living. So I can give an argument either way and do it in a respectful way. And I think you can totally do that. Um, but I noticed, during that whole time when he came out and talked about that, a lot of people were criticizing him for that, and which I can understand. But he should be able to do what he wants to do, and whatever. And over time, I did notice, and I still watch him, and I did notice that there were certain films that he um, kind of was being, I don't know, it felt like he was being giving a to a degree, he was giving certain films a really big pass, and he wasn't being very critical at all to certain things that I saw that I felt were not very good. And and that's fine. He can do what he needs to do, and he can do what he wants to do. But honestly, and again, it's just my opinion, and what does my opinion matter? I honestly, I was a little bit disappointed, that suddenly there was going to be, instead of just him talking about film and discussing films, and and just it being that experience, I was a little bit kind of bummed out that it was going to be under this kind of weird pretense because of where he was at in his career. And I'm like, that shouldn't really matter. It's like you really you can really get into something or not, and be able to express it and not feel like you necessarily have to owe this or owe that to this person or this thing. So I did notice a substantial difference into how he was talking about certain films. And again, that's just my personal opinion. So it is what it is. The one thing I did say, um, or that I did feel, was I did notice he's Chris Tuckman's always been a big um, proponent of people going to the cinema, and that because of streaming and all of the crap that we've been going through in this world, but especially with streaming and box office failures and trying to get people to go to the theater and trying to like keep theaters open. He's always been a big proponent, which I've always loved about him, about people should, you know, go, you should experience a movie in the theater. Like that's the way to do it. That's the way to you should do it. That's the ultimate way for to have the ultimate experience around cinema. And so he's always been a big proponent of that. But what I started noticing, and again, this is just my opinion, and I'm not saying it in this in a way to knock him. Um, but I started to see that he was talking about certain films where he was, and again he still is critical of certain films. But I remember seeing a handful of reviews um, where he was pretty critical of these movies and more or less um, wasn't really recommending the film. And yeah, he was doing it in a little bit more of a kinder fashion, I guess, if you will. But he was still, but then he would also be insistent that, you know, more or less say, okay, this film is not very, very good. It might be part of, say, an IP or a franchise. For instance, the Avatar, the most recent Avatar movie, Fire and Ash. He was pretty critical of that film. But he would also say, tell his followers or his people that even though this movie isn't very good, you should still go to the theater and see it to support the industry as a whole. And for me, I don't really, I don't really jive with that because I feel like, as a consumer, as a person, you know, there are, I don't believe in this thing of where people will say, well, people don't go to the theater anymore because there's no good movies coming out. I really think that if people believe that, and I understand that argument, sometimes I have that argument, but if they're talking in the context of like 2024, 2025, and 2026, if they're talking in that context, in that time frame, I feel like those folks are kind of full of shit because, and they're clearly not paying attention to anything that's coming out because I think there's been some incredible movies. And I have gotten into things with people where they'll say, "Oh, the reason that people don't go to movies is because there's no new ideas. There's no fresh things out there. Everything is a remake or a part of an IP, an established IP, or it's a Marvel movie or whatever." And it's like, yeah, we still have those things coming out. That's not necessarily anything new. Even the franchises have been, I mean, franchises aren't necessarily anything new. I mean, they've been around forever. There's probably more of them now, but I mean, more due to comic book movies, but that's not anything inherently new. Uh, but there are so many great films that have come out, and I'm like, okay, here you go. You could just name one after another of a newer, fantastic film that is something that's really unique. It's not some established IP, and why are you still saying that, and why are you not going to the theater to support that? If you're going to say that, just this very hypocritical thing, and I can't, I feel like that argument right now does not have any legs under it. And so, and when it gets to with Chris Stuckman saying that with around films, in this example, and he said he's done it many other times, but most recently with Avatar, Fire and Ash, I was just like, no, I'm not like, why would I be a mindless, consumer when I have that freedom of choice as a consumer. I'm a taxpayer and try to work hard for my money. And there are a plethora of other films out there that are coming out or that are out the same time as this movie is, that this movie is out. Why would I make this mindless choice when I could obviously go see something that is going to be really good? When there's clearly good choices, and I feel like that's pretty brainless and kind of reckless, I think. So, there's that. But again, this is just my opinion. What do I know? So, again, fast forward to, the completion of Shelby Oaks. And it came out last year, 2025. And I will say, like, when I was mentioning his Chris Tuckman's big decision as far as how he was going to review movies, there was he did get a lot of flack for that, and there were a lot of people that were commenting on that, and I do think, again, people crossed the line, not being respectful, because I think that's one thing that just really lacks in this society, like people, having different opinions and being able to have I guess, a debate or a discussion around it, but yet you can still be respectful and have different opinions. And I think there were a lot of people who were starting to criticize him, but in a kind of in a really in too much of a negative kind of way. Making it a little bit more nasty, making it kind of personal, which is so ignorant, I think. But that's just how we are as a species, unfortunately. Not everyone is that way, but I think most people have that approach. I mean, just look how the world is. I mean, it's just how it is. So, you know, that unfortunately is never going to change, and it could be one of those things that, you know, I don't know. I don't know where it's going to go, but anyway, so the movie was completed, and the film Shelby Oaks ended up getting picked up by a really big distributor. It was picked up. Shelby Oaks was picked up by Neon, which is wild because Neon is one of the biggest distributors out there. They do a lot of foreign films, real interesting films, and Shelby Oaks is, for the most part, a horror film. So, but that's major. I mean, that's a major company. The other thing that happened with this film, which was huge, was Mike Flanagan was got involved with Shelby Oaks. Chris Stuckman wrote this whole film and directed it, and I think I heard that he co-wrote this film with his wife, which was really interesting. Um, there's another director. There's another fantastic director, although I think he is kind of hit or miss these days, but he's had some really great films. Ben Wheatley, British UK director. He does, as far as I know, all the movies that he's directed. He directs himself, and then he co-writes every film with his wife, which is pretty wild. Ben Wheatley. He has just a side note. He has a movie called Kill List, which is such a badass movie. One of the best horror films that has come out, I think, in a very long time. Quite a few years old now, but anyway. So all these things happened to Shelby Oaks. Like, it got picked up by Neon, which was huge. Mike Flanagan got involved, and then he produced it. He was also, I guess, hands-on. He ended up working on the film, and they did a bunch of reshoots. Helped come in and kind of sculptured the film a little bit differently from what I gathered. And Mike Flanagan is, he, as far as like new forces, new faces in horror, as far as filmmakers, Mike Flanagan is like one of the greatest. He's awesome. I mean, pretty much everything he does is just incredible. Whether it's a series or a movie, he's just really, really good. Super talented director, writer. He's a multifaceted guy, but I think he's one of the best guys in modern horror. He does a fantastic job as of late. He's been adapting, Edgar Allan Poe stories, Stephen King. I mean, he's just great. He's a fantastic director. So that's huge. huge. I mean, one of the guys who Mike Flanagan is one of the best guys around in the horror industry. To now, he is going to be producing your film, and not only being a producing, but actually like I think some to some degree acting as a executive director. You know, that's wild. And then getting picked up by Neon for to get a wide release. Like that's massive. So then a couple of weeks or months later, the film was I guess completed. Shelby Oaks was completed, and then during that time, it was submitted to, or I should say, before it got picked up by Neon. Is I think it played Shelby Oaks played at a bunch of film festivals, and then I think after that was when it got picked up by Neon, and then it got a wide release, which it did. It was in theaters all over the place. I mean, because Neon is huge. I went to the movies a few weeks ago, and I can't remember what. I'm trying to think what the hell movie it was that we saw, but it was playing. It was playing there. Shelby Oaks was playing there. It was wild. Um, so it was. It started going through the circuit. The festival circuit was playing at all these big festivals. You know, Chris Tuckman is a huge. Again, he's probably the biggest movie YouTube guy out there, and all these things. Um, and I started seeing kind of reviews and feedback from people who had seen it, and it was not very good. People were not really responding in a good way to the film. That was the initial buzz I heard about the movie, was that this movie was kind of clunky, not really, not really exciting, and nothing. It didn't really offer anything new. It wasn't really doing anything different. You know, so there was, and again, I didn't see any trailers for it. I did try to stay away from it, but I was really curious to see what this movie was going to be like, because it's a first time feature. But the build up, the talk of this movie became a major part of Chris Stuckman's channel. So you were hearing about it all the time, and plus there were lots of people, you know, doing the crowdfunding where they were funding this movie. So there were a lot of other people and a lot of other YouTubers that were involved with making this movie. So there was a lot of buzz, a lot of talk around this movie, and a lot of investment, and you know, in a literal, you know, from a literal financial sense. So, but the buzz and the feedback, the basic kind of, you know, thing I was hearing was that the movie was was not very good, and so I was like, okay, you know, that's going to happen. You know, you have great directors that come out of the flood, you know, come out of the gates, and they just knock it out of the park, and they just kill it. And then after that, I don't know what happens. You know, they just nothing is as good. And then you have directors that come out and they have this level of consistency. And then you have all the directors who come out with something that's okay, mediocre, and then they go on to do great things. So, you know, it can go either way. That's just how it is. You know, I was thinking this the other day. It's like, um, you know, if you're like, I don't know, if you're sitting around and say you're a baseball fan, and um you have this mindset that you're going to become a major league or major league baseball player, like you're going to become a pitcher, and you're basing it on just you know, watching baseball every day. Like you've watched, say, 2 million baseball games, and from that you decide that you're going to become a pitcher, and that doesn't at all guarantee that that person's going to become a pitcher, because there is the experience, and you know, and the actual like acquiring skill It's a whole different thing. So that's really implausible because you can't. There's so many things behind the scenes that make that person, that give that person that ability. So anyway, um, and so I finally saw this Shelby Oaks last night, and really interesting. It's really really weird because really unusual. I've never seen. I have to say, I've never seen a movie reviewed by people this way. I've never seen all these different, I don't know, perceptions or opinions around people of a movie coming out. Which, again, movies come out all the time. There's so many movies that come out every year, every month, and tons of films from filmmakers that have been making movies, and then first time filmmakers, what have you. Like that's just a constant flow. And it was interesting because a lot of people, YouTube guys that I watch anyway, were starting to post reviews of this film, but they talked about how um, they felt really awkward on how to talk about the movie because for the most part, from what I heard, people had a lot of issues with this movie and didn't really like it. It came out, it got a national release, and I don't think it made any money. I think it was kind of a failure. But, it didn't really make any money for Neon. It pretty much was out. It got a big theatrical release, and then it went right to DVD, physical media. Now you can get it, but I don't think it made very much money at all. And people, obviously during that time is when the reviews come out, and people were doing reviews, but they were like putting up this weird disclaimer saying, "Well, I know Chris Stuckman, or I have been involved with this movie to some degree, or I just really like his channel." And all these things. So they were like, and they didn't really like the film, and they were talking about in terms of like being nervous and almost this thing of like walking on eggshells around how to talk about this movie, and which I've never seen ever before. I've never seen that before, and I understand, So there's that, which is really unusual. And then there were a lot of people who, again, going back to how people can be really negative. A lot of people who um, don't didn't like the film. They did. If you look at the comment sections on a lot of YouTube channels where this movie is talked about, a lot of people are started personally attacking Chris Stuckman in a way that was like, what is like? Don't you like get a life? Like this is a guy who's made his first movie and you didn't like it, so okay, that's fine, but don't get personal about it and like attack him as a human being. So that was the thing that was really happening. It's really, really weird. There was like all that going on. And then there were people who were like YouTube guys because, like me, you kind of look up to him and they were like, well, I didn't really like that movie, but I don't know how to say that. And it's like, what? Just very weird. And I saw that and I've seen that across the board and I continue to see that. And I just wanted to talk about that. That I just think that is kind of strange. Just a strange way of this. There's this weird kind of framework around this whole thing, and I don't know why that is because I think for me, I want to like talk about this movie like any movie I've seen. Like, there's anything different about it. This is a first time. This is his first feature as a director, and to me, it's just like watching another movie. And I shouldn't think about all of these other things that don't mean anything, and should not hinder me, talking about it, whether I love this film or whether I didn't like this film. And why would that be the case for anyone else? Why would you walk feeling of like reluctancy or walking on eggshells and then people being really critical of him as a director, and attacking him personally, and then also seeing people where if they do give good reviews or negative reviews, they people have attacked that even further, saying, "Well, you're only giving it a good review because you helped finance the movie." Just all this like garbage around. Just just see the movie and talk about it. That's all that matters. That's all that. All this other stuff is just like static and white noise. And I'm like, but this is like what as human beings, uh, this is what we create, and it's like just so it's all garbage. It's all garbage. It's like just talk about the movie. Who gives a shit if like you help finance it? I mean, anytime you, as an artist, and you put work out there, you're and you're expressing yourself. You're automatically putting yourself out there, and you're vulnerable. It's a hard thing to do that. Whether a band is putting out their first record or their follow up to a record that has been very successful, first time feature for a director, or whatever it is. You're gonna you're putting yourself out there, so you have to be able to take that in stride, and to a degree have some kind of tough skin around it, and knowing that there's going to be people out there that might really like it or people who don't really like it, and you just have to take it, and and learn from it. It shouldn't be this thing of like, and don't take it personally, like, because that's really murky. That's a real murky area to be in, and that can be really tough. That can really hinder you as a person and as an artist. And it's tough getting to that place, but ultimately that's what it is because you never stop learning, and trying to better yourself, hopefully, and acquiring those skills to do even better things, maybe. So I don't know. So, getting to the actual review of this film, I know that that was kind of a long-winded thing, 52 minutes into it, but I felt like there's a lot to talk about this movie. I've never seen a movie. Um, I've never seen movie reviews handled this way, so it's kind of like unusual and kind of an unfortunate. Um, I don't know, a lot of crappy behavior by the public, and so anyway, I saw Shelby Oaks last night, and for me, it was a very mixed bag. It's kind of a found footage film, and the film feels. I did like again. I did mention that I heard that this movie was Mike Flanagan came on board to Shelby Oaks, and then Neon signed to become the big company to distribute this movie. And from what I read, was the movie was kind of done at one point, and then they moved in, got Mike Flanagan in, and then he kind of put his 2 cents in, and then there was a bunch of reshoots and a little restructuring of some of the story, and this stuff kind of came later. Watching Shelby Oaks, it feels like to me it feels like that's what the case is. It felt like there was there was some semblance of some really good ideas and some really good moments, and then I felt like okay, the movie runs out of gas, so and the tires go flat, so let's go in and put this movie in a pit, like drive this movie into a pit stop, and we got to do all this work and try to get it going again, but yet it's not quite there yet. And it feels like that's what the movie initially feels like, is that it's got some good aspects of it, yeah, good to it. There's some good things about this movie, but then it feels like it does run out of steam, and then there were these um, all of these things tacked on to kind of like give it some kind of new life, and I don't think it helped. And again, it's the movie has some good. Um, I will say, like this film initially is kind of a found footage film. It does move into more of a I guess, like a traditional horror film. It moves away from more of a into like a theatrical film. But initially, it is a like the first act or two, maybe this also the second act. You could consider this film to be a found footage movie, and then it changes quite a bit and it becomes more of a regular kind of theatrical experience. And it is essentially about, well, I mean, in a nutshell, it's not in a nutshell, it's basically replicating. I mean, it's a found footage movie overall, I guess you could say, but it's basically taking pretty much the same um, plot line or storyline of the Blair Witch Project. Essentially, that's what it is. Like that's literally what it is. Things are changed around, moved around a little bit, but essentially that's what it is. And when the movie gets into the area of where they use a lot of the found footage, and then we're trying to, it's also um, it's a horror film. It's a found footage film. It does have these certain areas of the film where there is a lot of cool suspense, and it is a supernatural horror film. It moves way more into a supernatural kind of a film. Um, but I think that this movie, I guess you could say like, okay, it was I did find myself about 20 minutes into this movie because there's areas of some really good suspense, particularly around the found footage aspect, where I was like, wow, okay, I'm on board. This is kind of cool. There's some really good atmosphere. I've always talked about that with about movies. It's like if I love a film, or I should say, it can be a film that I don't think is particularly that great, but if it's got really good suspense or really good atmosphere, where it looks great, you feel like you're being pulled into this, kind of dark and sinister world. I will probably love that movie. And at one point, this movie was doing that, and I'm like, okay, I'm into this. This is cool. There is some generally there are some moments in this movie I felt were pretty creepy, pretty suspenseful, and I was curious to see where this was going to go, and I was on board until I really wasn't, because I felt like it built up all of this. There were moments of where this film built up some really cool, and there is a mystery aspect to the movie which I thought was cool. There is this investigative kind of mystery thing about trying to find out what happened to these kids that all you know died and then disappeared, and and all those things. And there's kind of the mystery around it, and the showing of this, of these tapes, of this found footage of these kids, and which again is generally really pretty creepy, pretty scary, and I was into it. And then the film evolves to where it becomes more of a theatrical film. It moves away from the found footage kind of genre, and then I felt like the movie moved into where it introduced um, some of the most like generic tropes. Like literally, it took the most predictable and generic tropes that you can imagine around horror films, and put them into this movie. And it felt like all of this kind of tension that the film at one point was building and suspense, it totally all the air, all that tension escaped. So by the time the third act came, it was I felt like it was a mess for me, honestly. I felt like this movie went totally off the rails. And I couldn't believe um the way the the reveal of what really happened to these kids and this disappearance. and how all of that stuff is revealed, because it is some I couldn't believe how cliched uh, these certain tropes in the movie are, just things literally that we've seen in more so modern horror films to death. Like, I couldn't believe it, and I'm like, why did they have to go there? Why it felt like it was like this, they decided to take the easy way out, or like the most dumbed down, take for like, let's dumb this down as much as possible. Let's give the audience such a level of familiarity and give them something they have literally seen a billion times and not even handle it very well. Um, I I was kind of astounded and very disappointed with how they did that. Um, and it really reminded me of some films out there that I think are really really great, but it made me want to watch those films because this movie I felt was not very good. And again, I think there are the second act or so of this film. There are some really good moments of general moments of where there's some really good suspense, like, and some general overall, like, some good atmosphere, um, generally pretty good. And then it moves into this area of where I just felt I was totally, it took me out of the movie because I couldn't believe that they were insistent on going down such a predictable route that we've seen so many times. And you can still do that as a director, but you can still make it kind of interesting. And I felt like they didn't even attempt to do that. And it did feel like this movie suffered from, yeah, I felt like watching this, when I was watching this movie, I was like, okay, clearly they probably had enough for about 40 minutes of a, like, this probably would have been better as a short. And I felt like, okay, maybe for 35 minutes, 40 minutes of this movie, they had a good story or they had something there, but then they tacked on all of this other stuff just to make it a full length feature. Like, that's literally what it felt like. And it felt like this movie was like trying so hard to be movies that are really, really good, but it did it in a very, in such a poorly handled manner. Um, Movies like Sinister, which I think is such a awesome horror film, amazing film. Um, it really reminded me of Sinister, um, because there is this kind of reveal of where there is this kind of occult demon um, lore that the movie kind of moves into. Um, I felt like Sinister was a major influence. Ari Aster, I think Hereditary, major influence. Midsummer, another major influence on this film, and which I thought was kind of odd, but I felt like this movie also had a big pull from or influence from True Detective season one, particularly around the King in Yellow. And but by the end of this movie, I was like, man, I want to watch those movies because those movies are so goddamn good. And they take those movies explore some of those tropes that we've seen. Those movies I just mentioned that were obviously influences for Shelby Oaks, but they do it in a inventive and exciting way. They don't give you the same old cheeseburger and the same old order of fries. They do something different. They flavor it differently. They give it a they put it in a different context. There's some imagination. And I was really disappointed that this movie decided to go down this, like, incredibly predictable way. And I'm like, and the other film I felt that was a big influence was Rosemary's Baby, which is another thing I felt was kind of odd. Yeah, I was really disappointed with this movie. I was really disappointed. I don't really recommend this movie. Again, I was in it to win it at one point, and then you start getting this reveal or of the you start finding out what is causing what is happening, and it by the time it gets to those places of where it's explaining those things or moving into that territory, it's so damn predictable. And again, you've seen it literally 1,000 times, uh, but handled in such a terrible way, honestly. And I'm like, I was just like, wow, how did this movie? Like, I'm just amazed that this movie got picked up by Neon. And how did Mike Flanagan get involved with this? Because I'm just like, what? Because of some of these poor decisions that they decided to make, which to me are just so obviously. Um, I just felt like they just decided to go this route of like stitching this together because there were these holes, and they were like, okay, we'll do this because this is the safe way out, and people are used to seeing it this way. They're used to seeing reveals or plot lines or uh, closure to the closures of certain stories. You know, the general public is used to seeing this because they've seen it a billion times. So let's just play that card because that's safe. And I'm like, what? Like I couldn't believe it. I was kind of dumbfounded that Neon got behind this and Mike Flanagan. I'm just like, again, I'm being pretty negative on it, but I wouldn't say it's like it's not. I don't think the film is a total failure. I think there are some things about the film that are good. I think there is areas of where there is some really really good suspense, and there is like again generally there's some really good creepiness. But ultimately, it's a big letdown where the film goes. Um, and the cast, um, again, Camille Sullivan, Camille Sullivan, Sullivan is in this film. Keith David, who is amazing, um, and also Brendan Senden. There are we're introduced to these characters in the beginning, and but then after the first 5 or 10 minutes, we never see them again, and the whole film is basically centered with Camille Sullivan, who is the sister of one of the girls that has gone disappearing, and she decides to take action to find out what has happened to her. And there are zero. I couldn't believe that there's no. The other characters have virtually no screen time. Her husband, who you feel like is probably going to be an important character in this movie, is has I think he has like one or two lines. There's no. She is pretty good in it. I think as an actress, I think she's got some good skills and some good chops as an actress, and I think she has this thing of where it kept me engaged for a while. But ultimately, I was like, I lost any kind of empathy I was gaining for her because there was nothing. It like ran out of fuel. There was no gas in the tank, and I'm like, I don't know who. Like, there's literally no other characters in this movie, and they don't serve any purpose at all. They're underutilized, and I just was like, what? I didn't get it. I didn't under. I never. I don't know if I've seen a movie. I haven't seen a movie in a while that made that kind of decision of where it introduces these characters that you gain to realize that you start to realize they're probably important to the story, but then you never see them again, and you're just like kind of dumbfounded as to why did they make that decision. Shelby Oaks suffers tremendously from that. Yeah, and again, it's not the worst movie I've seen. It does have some quality. If you're a found footage fan, there are some moments in this movie that are generally really good. For about 20 minutes, half hour or so into this movie, I was like, okay, I'm into this. But then it goes into this, area where it's completely directionless and so formulaic that it was really, really disappointing. And I think because it went so far down in, exploring these tired fucking tropes that we've seen over and over and over again. And then on top of that, there was no imagination behind it. I don't think I wouldn't recommend this movie. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. I was pretty disappointed with this film. Yeah, there's plenty of other movies out there to check out. Yeah, really, 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 really critical. Um, so yeah, really not very good. Not very good. So yeah. Anyway, have a good day. Peace.